All right, we are going to get started here. Everyone can take a seat. And if you'd like to have a conversation, you can do that out in the lobby. Thank you so much. We have two items on our general meeting before we get into the zoning appeal docket. And so we can start with the request for reconsideration. This is under tab 4 of your binder. And so there's been a motion for reconsideration for case BMZA PL 25-017, 5107 Old Hamilton Avenue. This was timely filed. And I'll let the board, I know I sent it out already. You also have the response from the applicant to the request for reconsideration. I don't know how much I want to summarize since you have it in front of you. Maybe I'll give you a chance to look through it. And I'll remind the board that for request for reconsideration, it's under Rule G. It's by far our most looked at rule that we have. As you all know, a request to reconsider is not a do-over, but the request has to articulate facts supporting the contention that the board's decision was the product of any one or several of the following, and then it lists several options: fraud, mistake, irregularity, inadvertence, surprise, clerical or typographical errors, or upon a showing of good cause as to the unavailability of evidence, the existence of newly discovered evidence, or other pertinent evidence not available or not presented to the board at the initial hearing. So the board has three options with respect to the request for reconsideration. The board can clarify the decision without a hearing, meaning that we could rewrite the resolution and reissue the resolution to clarify something that's raised in the reconsideration request. The board can schedule a hearing to hear more from any party that it wants, or the board can deny the motion without a hearing. Those are the three options. And yeah, I will turn it over to the chair. Obviously, feel free to ask any clarifying questions. We do have Charm TV here today, so we're going to make sure to have our microphones on as well.
And are there representatives from both the appellant and the applicant here?
They're here. I told them that we don't hear argument or testimony during the general meeting.
Yeah.
So if you want to hear more from them, I think we would need to schedule them on the regular docket in the future, in a different day. Which is one of the options. You know, we can schedule another hearing if you want, if you need more information or more argument from either side based on what was submitted to you.
I think this is one I think I might want to go back and see the original hearing, and maybe schedule another hearing to discuss.
Okay.
How does everybody else feel?
I agree.
Yeah, I also agree on that one. I was reading over everything and even the resolution, and there may be some more information that we might need to get before we can respond to this.
I agree.
Okay, so we'll need to schedule them for a new hearing. And we'll have to figure out what that means procedurally, whether they need to post again, whether we want to limit the scope of the hearing to just what is included in the motion. I think probably yes.
Yes.
Okay. So limiting the scope of the argument and any kind of information presented to what has been raised in the motion for reconsideration. Trying to think if we need to post again. No. Okay. All right. So we'll figure out a date on an upcoming docket that will work for this, and we'll schedule to hear more testimony and argument on the motion.
Okay.
Sounds good. All right. Then we can move on to the other thing on the general meeting docket, which is the dismissal. So the board has in front of it a list of cases from which we have not heard from the applicant for at least a year. And they go back quite a ways. They go back to 2022. And there's some notes that you have in front of you about what happened. A lot of cases were never completed, or applications were never completed. We asked for additional information and never got it. We asked for site plans, statements of justification. Sometimes it was application fees not paid. Sometimes people did get on the docket, but then they asked for a postponement, or they never posted and then never reached out to us. There's a lot of different things that can happen. And so because we haven't heard from these applicants in over a year, the staff is asking that these be dismissed and people can reapply if they want to move forward with their project.
I'm inclined to approve the dismissal. To the extent we need to vote.
I'll second that.
Yeah, in favor of dismissal.
Great, thank you. And we can move on to the 1 p.m. zoning docket. I don't have a proposed order for you guys. I think you can just go in the order that's on the docket. And I will start with my zoning appeal script here. Hold on one second. All right, good afternoon and welcome to the August 5th, 2025, 1 p.m. docket for the BMCA. My name is Becky Witt. I'm the Executive Director of the BMCA. We have all 4 of our current board members here today: Victor Clark, Leland Shelton, who is the chair of the board, David Marcosi, and Liz Cornish. Please turn off your cell phones. If you want to speak with someone, please do so out in the lobby. When it's your turn to talk, please come forward. Make sure that your microphone in front of you is green, like mine. If it's red, that means it's not on. So you need to press the button to turn it green. You will need to spell your name for the court reporter and take an oath before giving testimony. If you haven't already signed in and you intend to speak today, please do so today. Please do so right now. Everyone who is going to speak today should sign in. The board will probably vote on your appeal today, but the vote is not final. We have to issue a resolution, which is a written document that requires us to draft it and review it and takes several weeks. We will send it to you by email, and if you're the appellant, you will be able to access it through Acela. And with that, I will turn it over to the chair, and we can get started.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for attending. Now I'll call BMZA Appeal 25006, 1431 Myrtle Ave, Alafume, Sokoya. The project is to use the property as a multifamily dwelling with 4 dwelling units requiring variances to park regulations and off-street parking approval. First, we'll hear from planning and staff.
All right, so 2 variances here: minimum lot area and off-street parking. Minimum lot area for 4 dwelling units is 2,625 square feet is required. Only 1,424 square feet exists, so it'd be a 1,201 square foot variance. And off-street parking to add 2 dwelling units to an existing 2 dwelling unit building would require 2 parking spaces, and none are proposed to be a 2-space variance. Like I said, this property was last authorized as a 2-unit multifamily dwelling. This is also, sorry, Justin. This is also previously heard partially, and the applicant wasn't able to give the board the peculiarity argument that the board was looking for, so he asked for a postponement, and that's why he's back.
So as mentioned, this case was heard on May 6th of this year, and planning's recommendations hasn't changed, but just to remind the board, this is currently 2 dwelling units, which the lot area is just shy of the requirement for 2, about 60 feet shy. The current requested variance for 4 units is 46%, which planning found was excessive. Our recommendation is for approval of 3 dwelling units. That would drop the variance down to 24%. It would also eliminate the requirement for a parking variance, as multifamily dwellings with 3 or less units are exempt.
Sir, before you speak, please stand and be sworn and state your name.
Do you swear or affirm under the penalty of perjury that the answers that you give and the statements that you make will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Thank you.
And you, Mr. Sequoia?
Yes, sir. Sokoya.
So tell us, why do you need 4 units?
After my last visit, I look at the uniqueness of the property. Unfortunately, I'll be honest, I couldn't find it. The only reason that I'm coming back is because, one, the property is almost collapsed. And also in the area, there are a lot of abandoned buildings. So I'm thinking the uniqueness is for my client to want to invest in the neighborhood. And we inspected the properties. And initially, we were thinking that it has 3 levels and a basement now. We were thinking we can do 1 unit per level. But my previous visit here, with the zoning requirement, I said maybe I'll come back again and just request for a variance. One, to drop instead of a 4 unit to go to 3 units. And the other possibility is that at the back of the property, we have a space that a single car can be
Okay, all
parked.
right, well, let's like pause right there. Assuming that there is something unique about the property, if you were to drop your request to 3, I think the planning department said you would be exempt from the requirement to add off-street parking, so you wouldn't have to worry about space in the back for a parking space.
Okay.
If we were inclined to find a uniqueness and a peculiarity for this property that would, get you to 3 units. I want to discuss, you said that it's structurally unsound, the property?
Yes.
Could you discuss that a bit more? And could you talk about that related to other properties on the block?
In the block, there are about 10 or 12 properties. The first one, corner of Model Avenue and Moesha, that is, looking at it, you'd think it's a 4 unit because it has 4 mailboxes. But upon investigation, it was only 3 units.
I'm also interested in whether or not they are also structurally unsound, or is this the only property that's, structurally unsound that you
Oh,
said?
there are more than 3. There are more than 4 properties there. In fact, 14, 31, I believe 30 coming up, 29, 27. 27, you can, if you drive to the back, everything at the back is down. The side patio walls, the brick is all over on the ground. And then some other properties you can see from Model Avenue, you can see the sky standing on the street. They're about, I'll probably say maybe 15% of those buildings on that blocks are, at least they have a mark red on it. So I'm thinking that, this thing will either collapse now or sooner or later. So what we did is just to go in and shore up the building, put in a new floor joist in all the 3 levels, and then a brand new roof, just to hold the building together pending the time that we will come and present our case here. So
Did you discuss more about the neighborhood? Is that so what I'm trying to get at is it's
Yes.
hard to say that in Baltimore City, strictly just that a property is vacant and in need of rehab, that it's unique. It's kind of, and that could be a block to block thing. Is You know, does this block stand out more compared to other blocks? Like, what would make this a uniqueness?
Well, I would say the uniqueness is probably the abandonment of the properties there. So for, I would say, an investor to come in within this block to deal with this project or this building, it could be a catalyst for other people to come, because normally people don't come in until they see one or two buildings coming up, which is a risk that the owner is taking. But it's more of a reasonable risk because of the history that once you come in and start doing some work, people coming in will say, oh, okay, maybe I can come to the next door and try to rehab the property. On the opposite side of this rows of homes, it's more like an empty lot, just grass. So by my client coming in to do this will be interesting thing in the neighborhood. They might pull some more people in, and the fact that we want to go to one additional dwelling unit, it also will create spaces for people to come and rent. Yeah.
I will say I had some back and forth with the councilman for this district, Councilman Bullock, who submitted a letter of support for 3 dwelling units, which was what was planning's recommendation. The thing is about approving variances because they seem like a reasonable increase. That's not the standard for a variance. And so the amount of variance is actually not, I mean, to a certain extent it's relevant because you're supposed to approve the smallest variance that's necessary to achieve the outcome. But the context of that discussion was in the context of the proposed zoning bills that would relax some of these requirements. In this case, like Justin pointed out, the existing 2 units is non-conforming. That's how small the lot is. So 2 units, what they currently have is non-conforming. They're allowed to continue it because that was the last legal use. But adding an additional unit is even more non-conforming. Obviously, doubling the density is even more non-conforming than that. So just the context there. And I do think most of the structures on this block do have vacant building notices on them.
Does anybody else have any questions?
I don't have any questions.
No questions.
Sir, so I'm inclined to decline, to vote against this property receiving a variance because I haven't been able to find a unique characteristic or peculiar characteristic that's not shared by other properties in a zoning area. So that's going to be my vote today.
I mean, being that the whole block is almost empty, that will not, and the fact that this is more like a current problem in the city. We also contacted, like Ms. Wood said, councilman, and he wrote a letter in favor of it because, and I believe there are also 3, what do you call that? 3 bills now that is pending, which is also to help this kind of.
Yeah, I know.
Right.
Everybody wants to address the issue, but the zoning code is very stringent and very strict about what we can and cannot do, and our discretion only allows us to to try to get to the desired outcome, but so many ways. So, unfortunately, I'm going to be a no today.
So the leniency that I'm presenting to you would not tell, knowing fully well that the code was written years ago. The world is
I'm very
changing.
aware. I'm very
Right.
aware
Yes.
of all the conditions and
Yeah.
all the factors
Right.
that make it difficult that lead to a zoning code that makes it difficult
Right.
to reach desired outcomes that everybody in the city wants. Unfortunately, I'm in a position where I have to say no
Okay.
because my hands are tied by the zoning code.
Thank you.
I'm in agreement. I don't see any uniqueness to the proposal right now with this particular property, and I also just a little concerned about the requirement for the requested area needed to provide and to get you where you need to be in order to do this proposal. So I'm also a no for the application.
Thank you.
Unfortunately, I do have to be a no as well. I think what you're proposing is pretty logical, and I understand why the councilman supports it. And I think hopefully with the new bills that are coming before council, that discussion can become more nuanced. And when the law changes, we can reconsider, because I think infill development is really important, and taking on these things on vacant blocks that haven't had development in a long time is important. But unfortunately, we have to follow the law as written today.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I'm a no.
I'm in agreement with my colleagues. I mean, it's a shame in certain areas such as this. I live in the district.
Can you turn your microphone on, please? Thank you.
See that properties are basically destroying themselves daily through weather conditions and whatnot. I mean, it's odd. You might have a property that you think is unique because it hadn't fallen down yet. Okay, but that's not the kind of uniqueness that we can look into. We've given some thought up probably to the planning commission recommendation. They would say 3, but even that, we have to see that what you're dealing with is a unique situation. When you're saying the developers or investors will not come in because of it, we can't bend the law to make that happen. So I'd have to say no to the current proposal.
Thank you.
And just for everyone's background on the bills that have been introduced, under Councilmember Gray's bill, 3 units would be by right for this property. 4 units would still require a variance. But if the bill passes, then 3 units would be allowed here without coming to us for variance.
Yeah, and definitely, that bill particularly is being heard before the Planning Commission this week. And so I encourage you to write a letter in support of the bill. That could be one sort of step of action that you can take to consider providing your client forward momentum on this.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Now calling BMZA 25022, 3500 West Forest Park Avenue. Drew Tilden for the applicant to re-subdivide the property requiring variances to bulk and yard regulations approval. First, we'll hear from planning and staff.
All right. The request is for, I think, 3 variances. Minimum lot area in R1, 7,300 square feet is required. 6,085 square feet is proposed to be a 1,215 square foot variance. Thank you. And minimum rear yard setback in R1, 30 feet is required, 28 feet is proposed to be a 2-foot variance, and minimum rear yard setback in C1, 20 feet is required, 9 feet is proposed, 11-foot variance is needed. So this is Ms. Tilden can explain, but no buildings are actually, I think, being erected here. It is the redrawing of the line or the subdivision of the property into 2. And the board needs to, in this particular case, talk or discuss the question of whether this is a self-created hardship. And I'll pass it over to Justin.
And with this case, I'll just run through some background to provide context for our recommendation. When the 2017 transform rezoning happened, the entire lot was rezoned to R1, which would have required that the liquor store on site be discontinued by 2019. And in 2019, there was council bill that rezoned the portion of the lot with the liquor store to C1, which created a split zoned lot, which creates hardships of administration of the lot, and planning generally doesn't like when lots are split zone. So as these variances would rectify that and remove a split zone lot, the subdivision divides it so that the liquor store and property zone C1 is its own lot, and the resident residential structure zoned R1 is its own lot. So if that planning is supportive of the appeal to remove that split zone.
All right, thank you. So that is some quick background. I can provide a little bit more insight. Give it some more space. First of all, Drew Tilden, Rosenberg, Martin Greenberg. I'm here today on behalf of the applicant, and I'm joined today by Mr. Shin, who is a representative of the applicant. Ms. Witt, your summary was correct. This currently is one lot that has historically operated as two totally separate uses. So zoning records indicate that the liquor store has operated on that property since 1940, and that fronts on Edgewood, and then separately there's a single-family vacant dwelling right now that fronts on West Forest Park. That far predates my client's acquisition of this property. As has already been mentioned, this property under Transform Baltimore was rezoned to R1. As I'm sure you all know, the R1 zoning district in Transform Baltimore had a mandatory termination provision for retail goods establishments with the sale of alcoholic beverages. A city council bill was introduced to rezone that portion of the property, or that was the intent, in 2020, so that there would be a C1 portion on the liquor store, and then the other single-family dwelling would remain R1. Unfortunately, there was an error in that bill, and it rezoned the entire lot to C1, which also was not reflective of the uses. Charm TV is here.
One thing we might do, maybe switch out the mic and see if. Okay.
Perfect. We're gonna go with it. All right, much better. So the entire lot was accidentally rezoned to C1, including the residential structure. In 2024, a corrective bill was introduced to rezone the residential portion back to R1 and to maintain the C1 designation. So now that all of that is complete, we're just looking to subdivide this property to fix what is a long-standing history issue. This has been a lot that is split used, not just split zoned, since 1940, and it doesn't make any sense as a practical matter for it all to be on one lot, especially since the two uses have never operated together and are not currently operating together. So having gone through that, again, the proposed conditions are exactly the same thing. We're just trying to get the subdivision through so that we can reflect the long-standing use. In terms of community outreach, the applicant has engaged extensively with the Forest Park Neighborhood Association throughout this multi-year process in anticipation of introduction of the first city council bill. There was an MOU that was negotiated, and there was also a letter of support. And I've also included in your files yet another letter of support for this application from the Forest Park Neighborhood Association. So I will actually just kind of specify exactly which relief we're requesting now. So in the R1 district, we're looking for a minimum lot area variance to allow 6,085 square feet instead of 7,300 square feet, and a minimum rear yard setback variance to allow 30 feet instead of the 28 feet proposed. And then we're also in the C1 district requesting a minimum rear yard setback variance. Now, I'll just note, because of the way these lots are situated, the minimum rear yard setback variance for 20 feet, right now, that's the property's side lot line. So nothing is moving around. It's just that the C1 portion is going to front on Edgewood instead of on Forest Park. And similarly, that 28 feet that's proposed is right at sort of the end of where a driveway is, and that's the most reasonable location to create the rear lot line for the West Forest Park fronting property. To address the variance standards, the property is unique due to its topographical conditions. It's got these two structures that have been there for approximately 85 years. That is not a condition created by my client. It is a unique topographical condition. And the practical difficulty is that to apply the strict letter of law to this unique lot would give rise to my client being unable to subdivide and then separately really redevelop the second lot and potentially sell it, it for their own use, but it is not functional as a practical matter to maintain this residential lot and use with this commercial use. The aforementioned uniqueness is not a condition that is generally applicable to any R1 or C1 zoned lots. As I stated, it's not created by any action by my applicant. It's by the provisions of this code and the property's uniqueness. And I'll also note that this application or the initiation of the legislation for rezoning actually minimized the required variance relief. So without the change, the 30-foot rear yard setback variance would be required instead of the 28-foot, 28 feet. And the new lot would also require variances from the R1 district's minimum lot area, minimum lot width, maximum lot coverage, maximum impervious surface, minimum front yard, and minimum interior side yard requirements. So really what we're doing is, in a sense, mitigating damages. The purpose of this relief is to adjust the existing lot lines to reflect the historic operations. It's not due solely to a desire to increase the value of the income potential of the property. I've included a letter of support that demonstrates that this will not be injurious to the enjoyment of other property, nor will it substantially diminish or impair property values. I'll also note that subdividing this, as I stated, is going to facilitate redevelopment of the presently vacant dwelling on the lot. The variances are in harmony with the code's purpose to preserve and enhance the value of the structures for that same reason. It's not within the boundaries of an urban renewal area or historic district, nor are these variances precluded by the master plan. And again, these letters of support demonstrate that this is not detrimental to and going to endanger the public health, security, general welfare, nor is it contrary to public interest. So for these reasons, we respectfully request that you approve the subject application, and we welcome any questions.
Thank you for your presentation. That was well stated and really helps guide us through the inquiry that we have to make, starting with uniqueness. I think I'm inclined to agree that a lot with two distinct uses, R1 and in an R1 district with the commercial use and residential use, is sort of unique for both districts, and especially for the surrounding area. Does anybody have any questions about uniqueness or the uniqueness aspects of this application?
No questions.
No questions.
I have a
Yes.
question. Going back to self-created hardship, because the rezoning of the lot into two different zoning districts was done at the request of your client, right?
Yeah, so just to clarify, we're not citing the split-zoned properties as the basis for it's the topographical improvements, so it's the historic use of the property and the two distinct structures that represent those uses that have been operating since 1940. And those predate my client's acquisition of the property.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the would-be self-created harm would be the split zoning, but you're not asking, this isn't about the split zoning, this is about strictly what is on the lots.
Exactly. So,
Structures that are on the lots.
Yes, exactly. It's what's on the lots, which I believe is specifically stated in the code, topographical improvements.
Yeah, so okay, so, yeah, to have two distinct uses on a single lot is unique, and I'm willing to accept that. Any other questions about sort of that clarifying part of it?
None.
Okay. And so the practical difficulty about strictly adhering to the code, you stated that it would sort of limit the uses, unreasonably limit the uses, especially the future uses of both properties. Okay. I'm willing to accept that also. Anybody else have any questions about that part of that? Okay. So having found those two parts for the variance, we have passed the two-step test. So let's get to these other factors. the practical difficulty is caused by the code. I think you've made it clear that this is not caused by the applicant himself. The topographical conditions have existed for 85 years. And it's not exclusively to or designed to increase the value, income, or potential of the property. I think wanting to clean up the lot lines is a very worthwhile endeavor, and it's ultimately, the best thing to do here in these unique circumstances. It will not be injurious to the use and enjoyment of the property in the immediate vicinity, as sort of evidenced by the letters of support that we've seen for this application. And it will be in harmony with the purpose and intent of the code. There's no urban renewal plan. It's in line with the city's comprehensive master plan, and it's not in the CHAP district. So, and I do not think we endanger, be detrimental to or endanger the public health, safety, or welfare. For those reasons, I'm willing to vote yes on this application.
Also a yes.
I'm also yes.
I vote yes.
Thank you so much.
Okay, now I'm calling BMZ 2553, 822 North Carrollton Avenue. Nate Prattle for the applicant. The project is to use the property as a dwelling, 15-unit dwelling units requiring variances to the bulk regulations and off-street parking variance approval. First, we'll hear from planning and staff.
All right, so I hope this won't be too confusing, but the original application was for 20 dwelling units. And we received a call today saying that they would like to reduce the request from 20 dwelling units to 15. So the board has to decide whether that's a minor change that can be made on the record at the hearing, or whether you want to postpone it and ask for new plans and that kind of thing. So that, you don't have to decide that right this second, but that's something that that you might need to think about, whether it's a minor change. The relief requested is minimum lot area and off-street parking. Did you change the calculations there? Yeah. Okay. So under the 15 units that are being proposed today, 10,875 square feet is required, 7,200 square feet exists, so it'd be a 3,675 square foot variance, and off-street parking, 15 spaces are required, 0 are proposed, so it'd be a full 15 space variance. This building from our zoning records was historically used as a home for the aged with 27 rooming units. And it was also used as a rooming house at some point with more rooming units than that. Yeah, so that is the application from staff perspective.
So as mentioned, the application for this property originally came in for 20 dwelling units, which is what our initial recommendation was based on. But the 20 dwelling units caused some concern for both planning and the community, especially because no parking is being provided, and also 5 of the proposed units were on a floor that is at least partially below grade when 20 units were proposed. And that would have been a 51% variance for that. So planning's recommendation was to lower the number of units down to 15, reduce it to a 34% variance, and allow for a more modest increase in density while reusing a existing structure, and take some pressure off of the street parking in the neighborhood. So planning recommends approval for 15 units.
Okay, Mr. Pearl, can you stand and be sworn? And if your applicant, your client will also be speaking.
Do you swear or affirm in the penalty of perjury that the answers that you give and the statements that you make be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes. Okay, so first on this threshold questions about if this is a minor change, especially because it's a reduction in density, I'm inclined to think consider it a minor change and not really a significant change to the application. Any questions or?
No,
Agree.
I agree.
Okay, Mr. Pratt, can you?
Excuse me, Mr. Chair, Nate Prettle. I apologize in advance. I lost my voice a few weeks ago. The promise is much better than it was the last few weeks, so please bear with me. Nate Prettle, TW Consulting. I'm here with Lisa Dang, who's the property owner. And we're really excited to be in front of the board for the potential to redevelop this long vacant property on a long vacant block in Harlem Park. As both Director Witt and the planning department staff had mentioned, we are requesting both a minimum lot area variance, excuse me, as well as an off-street parking variance to allow the existing historic structure to be redeveloped. The variances first, the minimum lot area variance, a reduction in the request, I'll start with that, from 20 units to 15 units, as Mr. Walker stated. Has come about after discussions with the community planner and the community, as well as the planning department. And so we are amenable to that request. We understand their standpoint. We do not disagree. So that's where we are today. We're asking for a full off-street parking variance of 15 units, as well as a 34% minimum lot area variance. The existing structure is unique in both of its size, location, and its physical surroundings, particularly in its size. While the lot of 7,200 square feet is somewhat large in itself for R8, is not the largest lot on this block, but this is the largest residential typology structure on this block. If you were to look, I don't know if you should have an aerial photo in your file, you can see not only does this structure go from the front lot line to the rear lot line, it's also configured in an L shape towards the rear where it takes up the entirety of the rear of the block. The other residential structures, which may be comparable in height, take up about roughly 50% of the depth, in some cases 50 to 60% of the depths of the lot. So where this takes up 100% and meets the other lot line to the south. So this, to fill the existing structure is a completely different ball game than it is when the structure itself is half the size. So essentially, we're here with a structure that's double the size and floor area of the rest of the structures on the block. That's where we originally came up with 20 units. When looking at with Ms. Dang and the project architect and myself, is what does this building want to be? What does it call for? And 20 units laid out in the building. Understanding the nature of that excessive request, and the the nature of dwelling units that may be partially below grade. As a practical matter, the majority of the quote basement level is mostly above grade in itself. The structure has a slight slope that goes from Carrollton Avenue towards the back of whereas a mayor and city council owned Rec and Parks lot that would essentially serve as a right of way. It's actually a designated parcel. However, so there is the most unique aspect of this has to do with the size being double. That is, there's some other aspects of this that, while not unique to this property, are peculiar and impact the hardships and the practical difficulty. That particularly this block is constituted by a severe level of disinvestment. There are 4 vacant building notices on the block, 3 properties in receivership. Most of the properties are falling down, and there's essentially no active residential use on this R8 zone block. The other parcel, 2 of the other properties are institutionally owned by churches, and then there's a vacant lot. So we have an opportunity here to return investment to the neighborhood and activate this in a way that's not present on some of these other blocks here. I should also mention the final unique aspect of this has to do with the prior use of it. The requested use of 15 dwelling units, not to get into the minimum lot area differences, at the time versus rooming units compared to dwelling units today, the overall number of persons that are likely to be on this is less than the historical use, which was 27 rooming units and up. So a strict application of the bulk and yard regulations essentially prevents any reasonable reuse of this existing building due to an inability to fill the building. Whereas this case is not present on any of the other residential structures on this lot because they're simply not as big. So filling, again, 824 North Carrollton, 828 North Carrollton is not the same thing as filling 822 North Carrollton with a structure that's twice as large. And even the size of it is larger, not only in itself, but compared to the lot size as well. So that covers the minimum lot area. In addition, the off-street parking variance, the existing conditions and the unique conditions, particularly the size of the lot, in addition to its configuration and orientation, prevent any off-street parking. To provide off-street parking, we would need to request a curb cut. There's no ability to access the parking from the rear because of the mayor and city council owned, Rec and Parks controlled lot that abuts this to the rear. And creating a curb cut not only would violate the city's curb cut policies, it wouldn't practically provide any parking on the site due to the restrictions as it is. So to provide parking, essentially blow out the entire building, put a parking garage on the first floor and build up. But to preserve this building, for its historical residential multifamily use is not possible with providing off-street parking. I'm going to go through some of the other standards here. The unnecessary hardship and practical difficulties are solely caused by the code and are not caused by any action of the owner. We've inherited this property. It's not that we're building a 10-story addition on top of it and trying to put 15 units. This is what the building calls for. The unique size and then orientation of this L-shaped structure being so much greater than the rest of them is what leads to the need for these variances. The purpose of the variances are not based on a desire to increase income. They're solely based on the desire to renovate this deteriorating structure for what is a permitted use type, multifamily dwellings. So the variances will not be injurious to the use and enjoyment of other property in the immediate area, nor will substantially diminish or impair property values. The ability to stabilize and activate this existing building will benefit the immediate area and the neighborhood as a whole, and will also serve to protect and stabilize the abutting structure at 824 North Carrollton Avenue, which is in extreme state of disrepair, and frankly, even further collapse is imminent. So it's something that we're looking to do as soon as possible. The variances are not precluded by any other plans, and in fact, they are strongly supported by the city's newly enacted comprehensive master plan. And I'm going to just go over a couple quick points from our Baltimore master plan that are directly related to this request. In the affordable housing section, goal number 1, increase and support types of housing for the most vulnerable residents. I may ask Ms. Dang to elaborate on this, but the plan is to market this towards elderly housing, particularly those who are already in the immediate neighborhood. The closest active elderly multifamily dwelling to this property is on the other side of the Lafayette Square Park, which is on the other side of this property, and it's the St. James apartment building with about 150 units at a density that is much greater compared to its lot area than this request would be. In addition, the recommendation 1.05 provide more options for seniors to move into quality housing that meets their needs. Also supported by goal 4, leverage investment in affordable and new housing as a tool for community and economic development. Also, likewise, recommendation 4.05, encourage a mix of housing styles that fit into various neighborhood contexts. Specifically here, the reuse of an existing historic structure for its predominant historic use. Finally, the designing for public safety section of the master plan, and in goal 5, assess and understand impacts of zoning and land use on public safety and identify ways to use them to improve public safety. And subsection recommendation 5.03 is to increase density to provide more natural surveillance. And this is directly from the plan. More people equals more eyes on the street. We have a block right now with essentially nobody there. And this will hopefully be the first of many redevelopment, probably reinvestments along this block. We hope that this is the linchpin for that type of investment, and it will provide safety for not only the existing residents, but for future residents. One thing that I left out about the off-street parking, the fact that this property abuts both at the rear and the closest lot on the front are both Rec and Parks, Mayor City Council owned open space lots, one being Lafayette Square Park, the other being the Rec and Parks controlled. I don't know how to describe this other than an open space lot. It's not a right-of-way. It is, again, a Rec and Parks controlled, city-owned lot directly behind it. So the fact that there are no homes across the street, there are no residents, the parking impact of not providing off-street parking here is different than it would be should there have been more housing on the other side. There's less cars in this immediate area on this block than there would be on comparable blocks should they not be fronting on an open lot. And finally, the variance will not be detrimental to or endanger public health. The renovation of this historic structure is in the best interest of the public's health, safety, and welfare. And really, I can't overstate the need for this type of investment. I mean, this property, the first time I met Ms. Stang there, she made me aware that the first elevator in any property in Baltimore City was included in this, and there's bits of that are still there. I think she plans on reincorporating that into design. This is sort of pushed towards that L-shaped portion of the structure at the rear. The structure has about 15,000 square feet of floor area as is, and that's, and we end up with 15 units. Ultimately, the units will be less than 1,000 square feet, but I think it gives you a sense of the existing floor area here and the need to fill that, which is a unique characteristic not shared by others on this block or throughout the neighborhood. I appreciate the coordination of the planning department, particularly Mr. Walker, in getting to the point where we are here, and which evidenced by our reduction in the request. I mean, this is the minimum variance necessary. Again, we started at 20, so this is what it needs to take this, all things taken into account. We're happy to reduce that request to 15. Happy to answer any questions myself or Ms. Tang, and I would respectfully urge the board to approve this appeal and allow for this investment.
Any questions? To begin?
Just one clarification. I'm assuming that the request from 20 to 15 also affects the drawings that were submitted.
Correct.
So
we will supplement this. Yeah, we really decided to make this change as of this morning. Like I said, we've had ongoing negotiations, let's say discussions more than negotiations with the community planner as well as Mr. Walker. And, I was pleased Ms. Dang, understands and appreciates the input from the planning department. So that was, we really just made this request this morning, and we will supplement the file with new plans.
Well, let's begin with the structure itself. So let's talk about this historic use. It was a rooming home. Can you tell us more?
Frankly, I can't tell you more about it. The information that I have, I don't know if Ms. Tang has anything, is basically what, from the city records, the same this city has. I think it's just, it helps support where we're going with this more than anything.
So the existing conditions, it's 27 separate, individual rooms?
The previous owner wanted to do this property as a rooming house. He's a doctor. He wanted to do it as a like a rehab center. But then the project never went through. He didn't do any work to it. And then when we purchased it, there was some kind of framing to be rooms, but never complete, never finished, never occupied. So.
Thank you, Lisa. And to be good, the request here is not for a rooming house. This is for 50.
I just want to.
Yes.
Part of the justification for the lot area variance is that there's an existing structure that had with an intense density compared to other structures, other properties, in the zoning district. So I want to make sure we have a robust conversation on the record about what those conditions are like right now.
Yeah, as Ms. Stang, and feel free, please to add in, but there is some framing there, but the building is in largely in a state of deterioration. So I think the prior historic uses and the configuration of the building is hard to get a good sense because there's so much deterioration and rot, in the building. It's hard to, but again, we're just going by what city records have. I think the predominant unique condition here is the size and configuration of the structure itself. Again, I don't know if you're able to pull up your aerial pictures here, but it's, immediately evident when looking at this compared to particularly the properties that would be most similar are the ones to the north, and they are roughly about half the size of this structure.
Okay, and so I want to make sure we had the numbers I'm looking at are correct. With the 15 units, the minimum lot area needed is 10,875 square feet. Okay, so this is for the existing request. Okay. I'm inclined to believe that that's a sort of a unique or exceptional characteristic or circumstance for this property, especially as I look at some of the aerial photos, look at the application compared to other properties. And so, but I would like to hear more about if you considered doing less than 15 units. Like, well, how did you, why do you need 15?
Sure. And again, basing this off the original request, when Ms. Tang, she purchased this and look at redevelopment, is saying, one, what fits in the building? I think I talked about that 20 units. But two, what will allow this building to practically financially be redeveloped? And there's a big difference between, requesting a variance solely for increased economic gain and requesting a variance that simply to allow a building to be redeveloped. I think anything under this 15 units, due to the state of the structure and severe disrepair, due to the state of the abutting and adjoining property at 824 North Carrollton and the additional costs that it's going to take Ms. Dang, to deal with that, and when she encounters that and the renovation, and the disinvestment and distress of the area, this is what will allow the project to go forward. And I think that's supported by the fact that the building itself, wants to be 15 units, again, demonstrated by the prior use. So it's a hardship with filling this building. So if we were to put 10 units in this building, what we would be left over is essentially, half to slightly less than half of it completely vacant. We're not looking, you could put 10 4-bedroom units in this, but you're not going to be able to lease that. That's not, what's being marketed or, what tenants are looking for in this area. So frankly, it's a plan that doesn't make sense, again, based on the size, prior use, configuration of the structure, and its conditions.
Is your proposed building preserving any of the existing structure?
Yes.
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 I'm just looking at the aerial views and the proposed drawings. I just didn't see any relationship between the two designs. So that's just what triggered the question.
Yeah, the goal is to preserve the entire structure, and there's portions of the structure that were used, sort of as walkout decks before within the footprint. Those will likely be filled in to create additional units within the existing footprint of the building.
So when you, if the board approves it, you would be still using all of the floors of the building? You'd just be redrawing the size of the units, or would you just not be using the basement at all? How would that work?
And Ms. Not to speak for you, I think you can go ahead first.
If we approve for the 15 units, we will utilize the basement, the walkout area, to utilize as the handicap access point. Mm-hmm. So the first floor and the second floor will be handicap access units, and the third and the fourth floor will be regular units. And then I'm trying to do as much unit as possible because most of them are 1 bedroom for senior living, 55 and up. So they do not require big, massive units. Mm-hmm. So, and then the reason I wanted to utilize the walkout area because it's easy for wheelchair accessible. If I'm not using the basement, the walkout area, then I will eliminate a lot of the handicap use accessible and use that as a storage space, basically.
And then thank you, Lisa, that's very helpful. The walkout area is completely above grade when you're there. There's it's not like, you're in the unit and the window, is sort of at a head level. The rest of it's below grade. They're fully at grade where these units are proposed. But Ms. Witt, further, there will likely be, a reconfiguration of this in some sort to take advantage best of, 15 versus 20.
I think, I'm just thinking about it in terms of the board hasn't seen, obviously, the reconfigured plans because they haven't been created yet. And so to make the record clear and to make future permitters understand what we've done, should the board wait for its final approval until we've seen the redrawn plans? Or I guess I'm just
that's actually what I was alluding to when I was asking the questions, and you actually asked the same question I was going to ask, where's the rest of the density of the existing building going? So right now I'm looking at a set of floor plans that have 4 stories with 5 units, each is 20. So there's going to be obviously a volume of space that's not being shown on currently. So I would recommend a settlement.
Yes, the assistant building is the fourth floor. There is, and then in the back of it, there's 2 floors. And I don't think that the plans incorporate the back 2 floors. Yeah. And that give us a lot more.
Well, now now that it's been raised, and now that I've thought about it, I do think that we should ask for an updated program, updated plans.
Sure.
So we'll know what the 15 units will look like. Do we think we will need, do we anticipate needing to hear back from the applicant with the updated plans?
I mean, I think that this, I see this being a postponement situation because I think that when we see the new plans, there might be additional questions that might
Yeah.
arise. Right now, I just don't quite understand how that building is gonna work from a programmatic standpoint with the 15 units that you're requesting.
Yeah, so we're gonna
That's just-
postpone it. We're gonna go for a postponement. Is everybody inclined
Do you-
to postpone?
Well, just a couple things, if I may, and thank you. And I think, Mr. Marcosi, I think part of your question and your line of your thinking here supports the variance request as well. Where is the rest of the, what are you going to do with the rest of the space here? And that's, part of the reason that we came in for this as it is. Obviously, I would love, if possible, to get a conditional approval subject to submitting a new plan. Provide anything else, or open this up, and I'll leave it up to the board of postponement, if need be. I mean, I think we've provided, the uniqueness, the hardship, and spoke to all the approval standards needed to get approval here. I mean, I could sit here and say, well, we're just gonna take all 5 of these units. I don't know that that would be the best thing to do, say, take the existing plan, take 5 of them off, and give us approval today. For the best interest of the project, I think there is some degree of reorganization needed here, but, if possible, I would like to come out of today with some sort of, whether it's not approval, acknowledgement, subject to a new plan.
I don't know if we give away preliminary approvals. I don't want to be in the habit of doing that, especially when, you said that just today you changed the plans.
Yes, correct.
So, that's also means that we have to rethink things also. And so, I don't want to set that precedent. So I'm going to, I think you guys should push for a postponement. Of course, what we discussed here today, and much of it will be relevant at a future hearing, but we're going to postpone and so we can look at a fresh set of plans
Sure.
to know what we're approving.
Yep, that's fine. One question, when we come back, is the testimony provided today still going to apply and be on the record,
Yeah.
or I have to start over? So
Yeah.
just to be clear, when we come back, answer any questions about the new configuration
Yeah.
and conclude the hearing.
For sure.
Okay.
Yes.
Great.
Yeah.
We would like to be back in 2 weeks if possible.
So please get in touch with
Thank
the
you.
staff and they'll find a date. Thank you guys. Appreciate
Yeah.
it.
Great.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much.
So now calling BMZA Appeal 25075, 1001 Rectory Lane, Drew Tilden, for the applicant. The project is to use the property as a neighborhood commercial establishment, art, dance studio, requiring conditional use and variance to maximum off-street parking approval. First, we'll hear from planning and staff.
Okay, this is a request for a conditional use art studio, which is a neighborhood commercial establishment use. This property does have a long history of non-residential use. I think it was originally built for non-residential purposes. There is also a variance issue, potential issue, that we raised when we looked at the site plan, because the site plan was submitted showing 18 parking spaces. The actual use only requires 5 parking spaces, and in the code, the maximum number of parking spaces that you're allowed to provide is double the minimum. So if the minimum is 5, the maximum is 10, and they're providing 18, that's too many parking spaces. So it's a maximum parking variance. However, Ms. Tilden has a redrawn site plan in your folder and may not need this variance at all. So I'll let her make that argument. We may just be back to the conditional use request and not the variance. And I'll pass it over to planning.
Okay, so regarding the conditional use for the neighborhood commercial establishment, city permits do so that there is a history of non-residential use of the property, meeting that requirement. Again, the parking lot is going to be reconfigured. Just a note on that, since it is going to be more than 5 spaces and it's reconfigured, it will need SPRC. That can most likely just be done at staff level, but get in contact with planning to do SPRC, and planning recommends approval of the appeal subject to that review.
Perfect.
Ms. Tilden, will your client be speaking
Yes,
today? Is
indeed.
she stand to be sworn?
Do you swear or affirm under the penalty of perjury that the answers that you give and statements that you make will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Can you state and then spell your full name?
Donna Jacobs, Donna Jacobs.
Thank you. Let's
Yeah,
begin.
thank you. So I just want to clarify a couple things about the relief requested today before we dive in. For the record, Drew Tilden of Rosenberg Martin Greenberg. I'm joined today by my client, Ms. Jacobs, who hopefully will not have to speak, but I'm glad that you're sworn just in case. So as background, what's proposed today is to use this 8,800 square foot, which is what SDAT says, but Ms. Jacobs just told me that they are currently working with their architects and engineers, and it sounds like it's actually 7,700 square feet, to convert this building into a dance studio, which is classified as an art studio under the zoning code, requires conditional use approval as a neighborhood commercial establishment. And then also to address the parking, so the plans that are in there, they're not amended. Those were provided by the seller, and we learned recently that they were not prepared by an architect or an engineer. And as we reviewed the spacing dimensions, realized that they do not meet the zoning code's requirements. So if you just take a look, I'm just gonna, it is Exhibit 8 is the site plan. Yes. So if you take a look at Exhibit 8, parking spaces number 1 through 10 are substantively the same. They're the right width, and they can go a little bit deeper. Parking spaces 11, 12, 13, and 14 aren't going to be permissible under the zoning code because of the required turn radiuses or turn radii. And 15, 16, 17, and 18 are on an adjacent related property that is shared ownership but is not the same lot. So our proposal today is we are requesting relief for up to 10 parking spaces on the property, which is a significantly smaller variance than what we had initially presented. And I will, as I get deeper into this presentation, sort of outline why what we're requesting is substantively the same. We're just decreasing the level of variance relief requested.
Okay, let's get through this conditional use first.
Sounds good. I want to provide some background because Ms. Jacobs does phenomenal work. And so I just want to tell you a little bit about the proposal. As background, the property, as has already been stated, has historically been used for non-residential purposes. I've included permit records in your files to that effect. But more importantly, the proposed use is to move the Morton Street Dance Center to this property. MSDC is a Baltimore-based small business. It's directed by Ms. Jacobs, and they train dancers across the Baltimore metropolitan region, providing instruction and performance opportunities to community members who are ages 3 and up. And then this space is also going to be home to the Full Circle Dance Company, which FCDC, which is Maryland's largest and most locally sought-after modern dance company. In terms of operations, this structure is going to be split into 4 studios. We're still working with the architects. We're in the due diligence period right now, so we're still working with the architects to figure out exactly how those studio spaces are going to look. But there will be 4 studios. It's going to be 10 to 12 students per class with a maximum of 16 students per class. So that gives a little bit of perspective on the scope of this. The off-street parking requirement is calculated based on studio space, which is why in this case we've requested the number of spaces that we are going to be able to provide on the property instead of referencing specifically the amount of studio space. But we can again tell you today that there will be 10 to 12 students, 4 studio spaces, a maximum of 16 students in a class. I also can tell you that the classes are going to be staggered in terms of their start times. So generally, hours of operation will be 4:30 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. weekdays, and then 8:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. on weekends. But again, classes aren't going to all start at the same time. So parents will come, they'll drop their kids off. As you've said, some parents stay and they watch the classes. Many parents, especially as the kids get older, drop them and come back after class ends. As we've already mentioned, there are 18 spaces that are shown on the plans that were provided by the seller. 10 are proposed, and they're going to be in the locations identified as spaces 1 through 10 on the plans. We've performed substantial community outreach. Ms. Jacobs has specifically. So the plans have been shared with the Hamden Community Council as well as the Hamden Village Merchants Association. Both organizations, in addition to Delegate and Prey, have submitted letters of support that are in your file. So in terms of the relief requested, I've already addressed this extensively. Mr. Chair, I will move on to the conditional use standards. Briefly, just to note that we're going based on the Schultz v. Pritt standard, which is applied to the zoning code's statutory requirements. In order to approve this requested conditional use, the board must consider these factors. First, the property is a rectangular shape and it's improved by a building that was originally constructed for non-residential use. The applicant proposes to provide more off-street parking that is permitted under the provisions of the code, so there's no need for concern in terms of the impact on surrounding traffic patterns. The attached letter of support specifically from the HVMA demonstrates that this studio is not going to impair present or future development in the area. The property is surrounded by single-family dwellings and several churches. The dance studio is actually compatible with this residential area. It's going to offer an amenity to nearby residents and a walkable one. The applicant does not propose any exterior renovations, but the updated parking arrangement is going to comply with the code's drive aisles. So that's actually potentially improving emergency vehicle access. The use is not going to require exterior renovations, so there will not be any impact to light and air in the vicinity. There are already adequate utilities, roads, drainage, etc. To the site. This is not a historic landmark. It's consistent with the residential character of the neighborhood. It's also consistent with facilitating the expansion of this Baltimore-based small business, which is a stated intent of the new master plan. This is not... Thank you. This is not an urban renewal area. It's okay. It is not in an urban renewal area. The only other... This has not happened to anybody else today.
So is the other mic?
It's off.
The other mic, though, causing
off.
the same problem?
Just slide it all the way over. I think we can hear you.
Great. I
Move that microphone all the way over.
I have a booming voice, I have been told. I'm not concerned.
Move it away and speak loudly, but keep it on so
Does-
that Charm TV doesn't get mad.
Is the Charm City TV, does it have its own mic? Is that why?
I don't know.
Okay.
It's something about my timbre. So the proposed use requires no further relief outside of the variance that I
The speaker comes out and overpacking, so when she speaks, the speakers go back to the
Whisper.
speakers back.
Whisper.
Yes, that's what I was just saying. So she's speaking, it's coming out, so she's right above it. Her voice, the speakers come back being heard.
So how do we keep from doing that?
It's just her voice.
Just slide it.
All right, I am done.
You're commanding.
You will not see me again.
What a great compliment. It's your voice.
Oh man.
You're doing great.
Than before. All right, so the stated purpose and intent of the code. The requested conditional use approval is in harmony with the purpose and intent of the code to promote and protect public health, welfare, and quality of life for the current and future generations, because it's facilitating not only the expansion of this business, but an opportunity for not just young people in Baltimore City, but adults to continue to take these lessons. It is beneficial to the general welfare as demonstrated by the attached letters of support. And to address just the 4 remaining considerations, the proposed use will not negatively impact traffic or off-street parking or the property's accessibility for emergency vehicles and the sufficiency of necessary facilities, so the dance studio will not be detrimental to or endanger the public health, security, general welfare, or morals. The proposed studio is not precluded by any law. The attached letters of support demonstrate that this is not contrary to the public interest. And the requested conditional use approval is in harmony, again, with the goal to protect and promote the public welfare. Do you want to start with any questions for conditional use and then move on to variance, or hit it all at once?
Let's start with the use, and then we'll get to the variance that's related to the use. So the adverse effects of the use is probably going to be pickup, drop-off traffic, parking. And you've addressed how you guys are going to meet the needs for parking demand. You've addressed that. Can we talk more about typical traffic, typical, for clients and people who come to the studio?
Can you ask?
Like volume, like how
Yeah.
many people do we expect to see on a typical day?
Yeah, so I'll jump in, but then I know you probably have a more on the ground answer. But I think just going back to the number of students that are going to be in each class, so if we're looking at 10 to 12 students generally per class, and not everybody is being dropped off, I also know that Ms. Jacobs is in the process of negotiating an MOU with the adjacent church that can provide additional off-street parking. So any concerns there, I mean, obviously we're providing more parking than the code would allow us to do, but we're doing everything in our power because we do recognize that this is in Hampden, and I'll to some extent address that once we move into the variance approval standards. But the goal is to stagger these classes to avoid having a large group of cars in an influx in this area. Ms. Jacobs.
Well said. We'll see if I echo. So ever since the start of COVID, our parents have become accustomed to dropping off rather than coming in all at one time and staying. And many of the students some are there, the little ones, for 45 minutes. Some older ones are there for 2 or 3, 4 or 5 hours. So there really is a differential in terms of the traffic patterns, and we've seen that over a number of years.
Okay. Well, given what I've heard from Ms. Tilden's presentation, and what you just told me, I haven't heard any reason to deny the application for a conditional use. There has no evidence has been presented that that an art studio at this location would produce any adverse effects that would be above or beyond the adverse effects that you would come to associate with an art or dance studio anywhere in the zoning district. And so for that reason, I'm a yes for the conditional use for the art dance studio.
Also a yes for conditional use.
I'm also yes.
I'm yes.
Now the fun begins.
So to address the variance standards now, in terms of uniqueness, this property is unique because it is a standalone, non-residential building that's located in the R6 row house residential zoning district. And it's not just non-residential, it's not an institutional building like a church, which you do see as something that's common in these zoning districts or a community center. It really was designed for industrial and commercial use. And then on top of that, it's in this R6 row house residential district that is higher density, and it's a historic R6 row house residential district. So those buildings were constructed before off-street parking was contemplated to the same extent that it is right now. So if you combine all of those elements, this property really is unique. And to apply the standards of this zoning code to this specific unique property would give rise to a practical difficulty because it would make it impossible. I mean, Mr. Shelton, you just said, is there going to be enough parking if we provide 10 spaces? So I think we all understand that it would be unreasonable for this type of operation in this location to be limited to only, I mean, it's definitely not 10. Off-street parking spaces would be the maximum pending the studio space. So to just address the remaining standards, these unique improvements and surroundings are not generally applicable to other property in the R6 district. The practical difficulty is caused by the imposition of the code standards on this property and this use, not by any action taken by the applicant. In fact, we're lowering the number of off-street parking spaces from what was previously provided. Lawfully or unlawfully is a separate issue. The requested variance is going to benefit Hamden residents, especially those who live within a few blocks of the property, because they would otherwise likely see a reduction of off-street parking availability if we were not requesting this variance. It won't be injurious to the enjoyment of the property in the immediate vicinity, as evidenced by the attached letters of support. And I will say, I think Ms. Jacobs can attest to this, they were happy that we were requesting this variance to provide additional off-street parking. It is in harmony with the purpose of the code to preserve and enhance the value of structures, communities, and neighborhoods, because this is enabling the applicant to expand their current operations and provide this valuable service to the Hamden residents. It's not located within an urban renewal area or a CHAP district, and the proposed this use is also going to further the master plan by facilitating the expansion of this Baltimore-based small business. Finally, it will not be detrimental to or endanger the public health, safety, welfare, or morals, nor will it be contrary to the public interest as demonstrated, again, by the attached letters of support. For those reasons and the reasons previously discussed for the conditional use, we respectfully request that you approve this application.
Okay, any questions?
I have a question about the parking. So maybe I misunderstood. So spaces 15, 16, 17, 18 are on an adjacent parcel, right?
Yes.
They're not, so we're not considering those. And then 11, 12, 13, 14 are going to be eliminated.
Yes.
And so then we're just left with 1 through 10, which are not 9 by 18. So are you going to move them back to be 18, but I'm still curious, how are we going to get the width that's necessary on those spaces?
So there's remaining width on the lot that can be adjusted in order to get us to, hold on, just one moment. I have actually the specific requirements set forth in here. So it's 9 by 18 with a 22-foot stall depth. So what we have here is 8 feet 8 inches and 9/16 for these stalls. So there's ample space here to provide, and we've asked for up to 10 off-street parking spaces. So there's ample space remaining within the property line to provide those 10 spaces and just widen them. And then there's also space removing this 8-foot to provide the 22-foot, the width or the aisle width that's required.
Okay.
Maybe I can help a little bit with this one.
Yes, please.
So between the property line and the face of the building, I see dimensions that explain 28, 36 feet. If you look at the bottom of your site plan.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So I think your drawing is just wrong.
I think that you're indeed
It looks like
correct.
the 18 feet could be accommodated. The 9-foot needs to be modified slightly.
Yeah.
And then you're left with a 18-foot drive aisle. Does that comply with the zoning requirements?
The drive aisle part, I don't know.
18 plus 10 plus 8. I think that's 36.
6 feet.
Right, that's 36.
See, some of the benefits of having kind of people. Stirring the pot, I know.
That's what you're here for.
Yep.
Okay, off-street parking.
And so, and I'm gonna take a step back and maybe take us out of the weeds. The fewer spaces we provide, the closer we are in compliance with the code. So if we are requesting you guys to provide more and SPRC says no, we don't have to come back and see you.
Yeah, I don't see that. I don't see that being a problem, honestly. I just wanted to clarify the stall dimensions.
Yeah, thank you.
Just questioning.
So the aisle width, it's two ways, right? So it needs to be 22 feet wide. If you're head in 90-degree parking, which is what this is. So I don't know that we don't have 22 feet. We have 18 feet for the aisle.
Correct.
So that's still a problem.
And we will talk to our architect about that. And we will talk to our architect about that. But I think in the interim, I appreciate the insight. That's very, very useful, and we'll bring it to the civil and our architect. But while we are here, we would still like to request variance relief, and if we don't need it, then we don't need it. And this is also understanding that we're going to have to go to SPRC for any drive aisle issues and making sure that the stall width and aisle width all complies with the requirements of the code.
So just to clarify, today we're here asking for a parking maximum variance of 10 spaces.
Yes.
Because you're technically only allowed to have 5.
Technically 8.
So
Technically 8, okay.
yeah, so technically 8, and the trouble here is that we're still in really early stages of design for the internal renovations. The dance studios are calculated for off-street parking purposes based on the actual studio space. But until we have those floor plans, we can't provide the specific studio space, but we understand that the building itself is now approximately 7,700 square feet. And so based on that calculation, what we're proposing here, which may need to be revisited with an architect, is going to be more. And the entire building is definitely not going to be studio space. There will be rest areas, et cetera, bathrooms.
I think, the board is in charge of what it does, obviously. For me, if we were talking about a minimum parking variance and there was just no space on site, I think it would make more sense to approve a parking variance just based on the fact that there's not enough space. But here, we're saying they're providing too much parking spaces, but we don't know exactly how many and where they're going to be on the site and how they're going to fit with the
Yeah, I think
aisle.
similar to the last application that we had.
Yeah.
We might want to revisit the variance when we have an update.
For the off-street parking only?
Yes, for
I think
off-street
the
parking.
use could be approved. I don't
Yeah,
know.
yeah, the use could be approved.
If the
but-
parking can.
But the off-street parking maximum variance, I think, we don't know what that maximum will be.
So I think here's my question for the board. If we look at this site as a practical matter, we aren't going to be able to provide a substantial amount more than what is permitted by right. And it's also clear based on our conversation today that it's in the best interest of the public for there to be more off-street parking than what is permitted by right. So what I am requesting is that we have a 10-space maximum. You have a sense for what the space looks like. There's a building, and then there's a small area that's unimproved by the building. And we're happy to condition this on SPRC review and approval of the plans and the traffic flow of the off-street parking area. But we just want to, for the interest of time, efficiency, and we also have a due diligence period that is expiring, figure out how we can provide you all with the comfort that what is being approved is not going to be outside of the public need. But I do think that saying 10 off-street parking spaces is well within the public necessity.
I understand that. And I think for me, based on site plan review clause makes me feel more comfortable that they're going to get things like turning radius and drive lane width correct. That's not something we necessarily need to do. And because this is an unimproved lot that, based on the property lines, is unlikely to be able to be developed into anything else at the moment, and parking does not preclude it being developed in the future the way that it is currently laid out, because there's not going to actually be any construction or anything on the site. I'm okay with approving it now.
Yeah, I kind of agree. This is different. This is a different kind of program when I compare it to our last hearing, right? That this is a different recommendation. This is a different set of drawings and a different requirement. The condition which I'll be providing is that obviously you do get SPRC approval, which you kind of have to.
You don't really have a choice about that.
Yeah, so it's not a condition, but,
Yeah.
so, I mean, I'm fine with that, with maximizing the spaces. I have no concern
Absolutely,
with
I
that.
think as many, I'm fine, I'm comfortable with as many legal spots you can fit on space.
I mean,
I'm comfortable approving that.
I will just, sorry, I keep jumping in. I will just say that this is a discussion we're having a lot right now with the off-street parking bill that's been introduced in council, because the bill removes minimums and leaves maximums. And I think we can't say that providing more parking than what the maximum is serves the public interest if the code exists to protect the public interest and the code says you can't have more than a certain number of parking spaces.
So I think, as we discussed this, I think that part of the question is in the public interest, but there are a whole slew of other factors that I went through to address uniqueness and practical difficulty that are specific to this property, and that make it particularly against public interest in this case, if you apply the zoning requirements for off-street parking to this property in the R6 zoning district.
Yeah, and I think the spirit of the bill that's coming before in terms of parking maximums is that philosophically, that's where I'll lean 99% of the time. But if I look at a property and it's clearly, I don't support taking down things that could be developed in order to create more parking and then give a variance. We're looking at something that is currently already designed as a parking lot. And in this case, because it's in between two commercial use buildings, I think that it's unlikely, in the future, maybe your dance studio expands and then you'll decide that the payoff of having more classes is not worth having the additional parking. I'm comfortable with it in this instance. It's a rare moment where you will see me be okay with adding more than the minimum parking allowed.
I'll take it.
But it makes sense based on the use, and I understand the case here. That's why I'm comfortable with it. I think for me, the zoning is a big part of zoning is if you look at it, does it make sense? And if you make that decision, are you saying something even better can't happen in the future? And I don't think in this particular instance, which is why it's a variance, not a blanket rule, is that I'm okay with it in this instance. But I think it is a tricky juxtaposition about, but at this point, I don't see what else it could be. And I don't see it as, since it's already constructed as such, it doesn't necessarily mean that it can't become something else in the future, where the difference would be, here is a building that already exists, that it can be repurposed, and we're giving the variance to say, you can use that piece of your property to become parking. It's, yeah, not.
Okay. So.
You're gonna see my face in the fishbowl tomorrow talking about
I'm confused about what we're approving.
Yeah, so I want to get
What
clarification for what
the
the.
board
What
is
the board is
approving.
approving.
So
Yeah.
I can reiterate the
Yeah.
request to the board. So we are asking a maximum parking variance from the minimum off-street parking or from the maximum off-street parking requirements to permit up to 10 off-street parking spaces on the property. As you all know, we can always take the variance and get less of a variance without having to come back to you. So if we end up saying, okay, we're going to provide 8 spaces on this site instead of 10, we don't have to come back. You don't have to hear my mouth about this matter. You'll continue to have to hear from me about other things. But that allows us the flexibility, and it's also something that you all have now acknowledged. You think that the variance uniqueness and practical difficulty standards apply to 10 off-street parking spaces.
Yeah, I'm in agreement.
How can the board determine that this is the smallest necessary variance when we don't even know where the parking spaces are going to go or whether they would fit on the site?
So wouldn't the variance get smaller if they didn't all fit on the site?
Well, right, but we're approving up to 10 spaces, but we don't even know how many can
What's the
go
board?
there.
I just want to make sure that I'm
If we are
understanding what
approving
Mr. Chair, what is there a question that you have on this?
I think we have enough information to know if we can fit 10 on the site, right? Do we?
I don't,
No.
I couldn't say that at this point.
Because we don't have an aisle of 22 feet, because there, unless it's one way, which I don't think it can be.
There's an alley to the rear of the property.
Okay, I mean, if we're gonna, okay, sorry, hold on.
And happy to condition it on SPRC review, operating under the understanding that
It's still not big enough, though.
Well, there are other means and methods that they can investigate to see if they can provide parking, such as angled parking, proper lane widths, a one-way approach. So that's on the applicant and also on SPRC to approve, right?
Yeah,
But should that have any decision based off of, should that have any leverage on our decision about changing the maximum request from 8 to 10? I'm sorry, from 10 to 8, right?
because what you're doing when you're approving a variance is you're saying it can't reasonably be 8 instead of 10.
I think it sounds based on this discussion that at the end of the day, if we could provide 20 parking spaces on this property, that would probably be ideal. That's why we've gone into the MOU on the adjacent property. This is an area where there is a dearth of on-street parking, and unfortunately, the code does not apply well to this situation, which is the purpose of variance. It is that there is a unique property, and this use requires a variance from the code's requirement because of the uniqueness of the property in the R6 zoning district. I think that it is 100% at the discretion of the board on whether or not to apply the law and grant this variance for 10 spaces.
So David, based on what you're looking at here, if it's just these 10, the measurements aren't to a point where you can say,
Well, again, it's not my,
Sure.
it's not my responsibility to say that,
Correct.
right? It's on the applicant's responsibility to show us that they can do that, but it's also SPRC's responsibility to review and approve that. The variance not in front of us is not for a drive-out width or for a parking width, as the tables explain that they have to comply with. The request in front of us is a maximum parking allowance. So I don't see a concern with this, me personally. Whether they can fit that 10 on your site or not is between their designers and SPRC's approval. Ms. Witt, just tell me if I'm saying something wrong. So right now, it's just a matter of they're just looking to see if they can say, hey, yes, are you guys okay with us providing 10 and not 8?
because I think in this case, what you're,
I don't see.
so there's two things I think you're trying to get to is one, variance should be as least impactful as possible, right? And so if we're saying minimum parking is based on the square footage, is that you have to provide at least 5.
I think in your notes is wrong. I think it's at least 4 and up to 8.
But that's still wrong
That's-
because they don't have the square footage of the studio space, just the entire building. So we don't even really know the minimum. So we can't really calculate the maximum.
But we can tell you, as a practical matter, what the operation is going to look like. And so we can take a look at what the code says and says, no matter what, that's not going to be enough. Because you guys, what we are doing today is presenting you with the operation that is proposed, 10 to 12 students, 4 separate classrooms. Some students are going to be arriving for 45-minute classes in those intervals. Some students are going to be arriving for 3, 4, 5-hour intervals. And I'm gonna tell you, I will have the HCC give you guys a call if
Well,
you say
I
no.
So
I would love to talk to them. That would be a joy.
I think, here's how I also see this argument within the context of things that we typically approve. So one of the things that we talk a lot about parking here is daycare centers, especially in-home daycare centers. And we're always talking about providing appropriate and safe drop-off and pickup locations. So when I look at the context of the street where the studio is located, I think the piece of the property that is currently improved as a parking lot provides a safe pickup and drop-off location where, based on the site and the street in context of the building, I would be concerned that there would not be a safe pickup and drop-off location without saying that that can be an area for parking, right? So that also plays into my thought process about saying, yes, it can be used as parking. That's step one. Two, while I am not measuring it out, I'm looking at a picture with cars parked on it, and I'm comfortable that 5 cars can fit there. If the board is, if the board is leaning towards 8, I'm fine with going to 8, but I think for efficiency's sake and recognizing that site plan review is going to get into the actual safety of how those vehicles maneuver in that space, I would like to see us be efficient in our process and say up to 8 or up to 10. I'm comfortable with either, but I would recommend making a decision now.
Yeah. So I'm looking at the plan and the space, and I'm thinking this through, and I don't want us to be the arbiter of how many spaces she's going to be able to fit in this, because ultimately, SPRC will tell the applicant how many spaces they can fit on this lot. I am fine with approving the maximum of 10. And having the final number be left to the determination of the relevant city body. And so I want to, just get your uniqueness. I do think that we have found unique circumstances with the property. It has a former industrial and now commercial use sitting in an R6 district surrounded by residential properties, with significant underdeveloped space on the lot that could be used for parking. Strict adherence to the code, which would minimize the amount of off-street parking that can be provided on the property, which would not be in the best interest of surrounding property owners and the surrounding community, surrounding neighborhood. And so I do not think that's the intent of the code. It's a problem caused directly by the code. I do not think granting this variance would be injurious to the use and enjoyment of surrounding neighbors. I think if you ask surrounding neighbors, that they would welcome as many off-street parking spots from this lot as possible. And so for those reasons, I am a yes for the off-street parking maximum variance for 10 spots.
I'm also a yes.
I'm also a yes, and just kind of want to reemphasize, we're not talking about taking something out of productive use to create more parking. We're talking about addressing the use of the property and the need for safe pickup and drop-off locations, and the fact that it currently exists as a parking lot that, while site plan review has to have the final say, 10 doesn't impact taking something else out of productive use. And that's sort of the threshold in this instance. It has to do with the use and the fact that it doesn't take something out of productive use to create more parking. So I mean, yes.
I'm concerned about what happens past the 8, past the 10. are we voting that if it goes to 20, it's okay?
Well, you have to come back, I believe.
Yeah,
and
so
ask
we're
for-
only requesting up to 10 spaces.
Yeah.
That's your current today request.
Up to 10
You
spaces.
got my yes.
Thank you, sir.
All right, thank you.
I'm going to propose that we go off the record here for a brief
Thank you so
5-minute
much.
break.
We're off record at 2:46.
Now calling BMZ Appeal 2578, 1643 through 1647 Cuba Street. The request is to subdivide and build 3 dwelling row houses on the property, requiring variances to bulk and yard regulations approval. Chase Hoffberger for the applicant. First, we'll hear from staff and planning.
All right. Request to build 3 row houses, requiring 3 variances, minimum rear yard setback, 20 feet is required, 11 feet, 10 inches are proposed. So it looks like that would be an 8-foot, 2-inch variance. Maximum impervious surface, 65% is allowed, 100% is proposed. So it would be a full 35% variance needed, and maximum lot coverage, 80% is allowed, 83% is proposed, so a 3% variance for lot coverage. This applicant is requesting to subdivide the existing vacant lots in this particular way. So the board will need to discuss the question of a possible self-created hardship because the variances are being argued from the standpoint of the size of the lots being small. So I will pass it over to planning.
So this project is currently going through our subdivision process. Just a minor correction in my staff report. Only 1643 is being subdivided. 47 will stay as it exists. Again, a setback for the rear yard. I believe there may have been a change in the impervious surface. The applicant will explain. And also for lot coverage, 2%. As planning doesn't think that doing 3 units here with the 2% lot coverage variance will significantly impact the massing or the context of the neighborhood for the infill development. And it'll be consistent with the development patterns of the neighborhood. So we recommend approval of the appeal subject to the subdivision process.
You swear affirm and only perjury that the answers that you give and statements that you make the whole truth and nothing but the truth.
I do.
Tell us about your project, Mr. Hoffberger.
Just one moment. Let me just hand this to you.
Thank you.
I'll explain what's going on.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me. Sounds like my timbre is working right. Just to preface a couple things here, as Mr. Walker said, this is a subdivision of only 1643. I'm just going to go up here now.
Yeah, I think moving to the podium eliminates that issue.
So this is a subdivision of only 1643. It's basically there's 2 lots here. 1643 is a double wide. It used to be 2 lots, and it was consolidated into 1. And we're in the process of re-subdividing that lot. 1647 is its own lot. So when all is said and done, we're gonna have 3 lots that are 66 feet, 10 inches by 14 feet, okay? And as Mr. Walker also alluded to quickly, the impervious surface variance is no longer one that we're being pursued. I had emailed Ms. Witt on July 5th with updated plans and an explanation of what's going on. Basically, in communication with the neighborhood, they had asked that we reconsider kind of going with what we would call the standard backyard in Locust Point, which is a parking pad, and going with something that's a little bit more pervious. So we're going to have 2 runners for cars and pervious gravel, and so that will make out to 35% impervious, 65% pervious, and so a variance is not necessary there. What I've got here is obviously a code map screenshot. And it's relevant in part because what's squared in green is this block of Cuba Street. And what's squared in red are what I'd call new development in Locust Point. I'll get to that in a second. Locust Point, just for context, for those of you who don't get down there too often, is an extremely developed neighborhood. Almost entirely single-family row houses. We looked, as part of our preparation for this appeal, we looked at 750 lots in Locust Point. That did not include the ones in red that are new development, okay? The ones in red, just so you know, the sort of narrow one along the train tracks, those were built in 2015, and the ones in the corner east of Sauter, they were built, or Stewart, they were built in 2017. And all of those lots have no rear yard setbacks and are fully covered by the structure. But of the other 750, 95% of those houses were built prior to 1920. So in this neighborhood, which is extremely old, it's typical, if not outright normal, for structures to violate setback and max lot coverage requirements, as most of the housing, 95% of the housing, was built before there was any zoning code whatsoever. So that's just a bit about the neighborhood context of what we're dealing with and what we're trying to align with as we build our houses. Cuba Street, and this block of Cuba Street specifically, is the only block in Locust Point where a plurality of the lots are vacant, unimproved. There are 3 structures on this block. And what we're trying to do with this development is to build 3 houses that sort of align in the front and the back to where the 3 houses exist. The other thing to note about Locust Point is that it is made up, again, almost entirely of what I would call short lots, okay? So what's a short lot? With row house lots in R8, the zoning code might consider a short lot to be one that's shorter than 80 feet. If it's below 80 feet, if it's shorter than 80 feet, you get 80% lot coverage, that's what you can go to. If it's deeper than 80 feet, you get 60% lot coverage. So we looked at 750 of these lots, basically every lot except for these new things. And 95% of them, again, are shorter than 80 feet. None of them are longer than 100 feet. So this is a neighborhood of short lots. Of those lots, Cuba Street is particularly short. It's not exclusively short. It's shorter than about 70% of the other lots. At 66 feet and 10 inches, it's a very short block. We think that makes for some peculiar conditions here. They're vacant, they need new housing in a neighborhood of old housing. They're very short in a neighborhood where houses were built a long time ago, and we're trying to kind of catch up to where things were built at the time. The other thing to note is that of the lots that are shorter than 66 feet and 10 inches, most of them, and I don't have a number, but most of them are either 16 feet wide or 18 feet wide. So they're wider than the 14 feet that we have in these houses. So we're talking about some really short conditions on which to build a house. And finally, the last thing that I want to say about sort of the peculiar nature is that the alley that runs behind this block of lots is the widest alley in Locust Point by 10 feet. It's 20 feet wide. So there's a significant amount of space between what you see on Beeson Street and really anywhere else. And then the corner of Beeson Street, which is sort of affected by that's a commercial property. So it has full lot coverage in commercial property. So that's a lot to say that we're dealing with sort of some peculiar lots here. And the peculiar conditions create a practical difficulty. The smaller space provides less room to build standard 3-bedroom, single-family residence, to put a car in the garage if people want that. This is a new build, so we're trying to, afford the opportunity for people if they want a garage to fit it in. And the lot coverage at 82% comes out to only 1.5 feet of overage total when you factor all that in. So as Mr. Walker said, there's really no effect or difference between the massing and the scaling of these types of houses, as there would be on any other type of housing in Locust Point, but particularly the houses right next door on Cuba Street, which we're trying to use as a precedent to set up the rest of the development of the house. So we're trying to build a 55-foot house here, which is not unreasonable for new development, especially in Locust Point. As I said, every other new house that's been built in the past 105 years has also encroached on maximum lot coverage, has also encroached on rear yard setbacks. And that's just a factor or a consequence of R8 zoning being applied to this neighborhood, but not really making sense for the way that the lots are built. So it amounts to a disparity that makes it challenging to build such a house. In terms of other factors, the practical difficulty is caused by the code's regulations that govern rear yard setbacks and lot coverage. These code regulations for row houses in R8 districts are not compatible with the existing development. The purpose of the variance is not based exclusively on a desire to profit. It's based on simply an intent to design an appropriate and comparatively sized row house that is consistent with existing development, provides a layout that is desirable in modern homes. The variance is not injurious to the use and enjoyment of other property in the vicinity and won't diminish or impair property values. We did meet with each of the 3 neighbors on Cuba Street. We had them sign plans showing what we wanted and laying out which variances we needed. So they're all supportive. We also communicated, as I said, with the Locust Point Community Association. Because of the summertime, we weren't able to meet with them and we weren't able to get a letter of support, but we did get an email from Dave Arndt, who runs a design committee. As I said, we adjusted our plans a little bit because of some requests that were made by them, but he also said there's no opposition to what we're doing. There's general support, and they're glad to have the development on Cuba Street. The purpose of the variance is in harmony and intent with the purpose and intent of the code, because the code functions to accommodate development of suitable housing on lots zoned for residential use, and this will further that interest. It's not precluded by any law, historical district, or master plan, and it won't be detrimental to the public health, safety, or welfare. This will improve conditions in the neighborhood by filling in some of the last remaining vacant lots in this neighborhood. So with that, happy to answer some questions.
Any questions about the peculiarity of the lot or its uniqueness?
No.
Yeah.
Aren't there a couple lots on the block that are narrower than these? There's one that says.
There is one that has a pre-existing built house that's 12 feet, yes.
12 feet, 11 and a quarter inches, I think that's what it says. So it's not the narrowest, even if it's subdivided.
No, but nobody is building a house on that lot.
Could you build a house on, let's say, because your client owns 1643, owns all 3, essentially.
After the subdivision, they will own all 3, correct?
Could they have divided it in half instead of in thirds and built 2 wider row houses?
Basically done
Instead of 3 narrower row
a
houses?
more major subdivision. I mean, they could. I don't know that would necessarily solve an issue. It's not what is being proposed, and because 1647 is pre-existing, they don't want to subdivide that.
Mm-hmm.
They'd just like to handle one property and redraw the lot line to reestablish the historical lot lines, which is a far less involved process.
Maybe our planning friend can help us out with a question I have. Is there not a requirement for new subdividing lots to have a minimum width?
There is. What is it in the RE zone? I don't have that on top of my head, but you can make any approval here subject to the subdivision process, and they would go through that as when it goes before planning commission.
Thanks.
That hasn't been we're far enough along in the subdivision process that at this point, we would know if that's an issue here.
Yeah, I was
So
just
it's not,
I
yeah.
thought there was something out there, but that's fine.
When we get these subdivisions, the issue of self-created harm always pops up, and so that becomes sort of it complicates these inquiries into peculiarity and practical difficulty or unique circumstances. However, given the circumstances, given the surrounding neighborhood, the size of these lots, the fact that they are undeveloped lots, vacant lots compared, and I do think that is, unique, unique, those are unique characteristics. The particular size of this block of Cuba Street compared to other blocks in Locust Point, in the particular zoning district in Locust Point. These lots are definitely sort of less, are not as deep, which is not a self-created harm. That's not a result of the subdivision. That's just sort of how this block of Cuba Street is structured. So I'm inclined to find that the requirements for uniqueness have been met for each of the variances. After hearing you just go deeper into the thought process about the subdividing the lots and the consequences of doing it or not doing it, I'm also inclined to believe that this is not a self-created harm. Although I'm happy that you did go into further detail about that aspect of the variance. Because of the particular shape and size of these lots, I find that strict compliance with the zoning code is a practical difficulty. So to build 3 modern homes that would be marketable in this part of Locust Point and wouldn't be prohibitive to build, cost prohibitive to build. I think that the relief requested is reasonable. I do not think that it was a self-created harm. I do not think that granting you these variances would be injurious to other properties or or to neighbors, as evidenced by nobody here today in opposition. I think it is in harmony with the code. I think to continue to develop underdeveloped land in the cities is something that should be applauded. It's something that the zoning code does want to happen, although it can be difficult at times. And so for those reasons, I am a yes for the variances.
For the purpose of the resolution, could, as you all go, can you give more detail about peculiarity here? More specificity about it, what you mean.
Yeah, I can elaborate on that when I give mine. I'm also a yes for this, and for the reasons as explained. This specific block as being narrower than any other block within its area, or not narrow, but shallower than any other block in the area. In my opinion, is a reason for it being unique in that sense. And so for that reason alone, I find it being peculiar, and I am okay and am for this application. So I'm a yes, thanks.
I'm also a yes.
I want to see if I heard 2 things correctly. One, you said that the alley behind Cuba Street is larger.
It's 10 feet wider than any other alley in Locust Point.
Okay, so there's your space right there.
There's significant space separating.
All right.
Yeah.
And the impervious surface, you're creating not to have to get a variance for it because you're using parking pads that are separated.
Pervious gravel.
Gravel.
Right,
Okay,
correct.
all right. I mean, yeah.
So there, yeah, it's going to be 65% pervious.
Okay.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now we're calling, well, I guess you can stay there.
Well, I need to let Justin.
Now calling BMZ Appeal 2579, 2033 Eastern Avenue, to use the property as a parking lot. Principal use requiring conditional use approval. Mr. Hofberger for the applicant. First, we'll hear from staff and planning.
All right. The request is to use the property as a parking lot, as a principal use. The property has an existing vacant structure, a former Burger King, that will be boarded up and kept vacant. So that's something to consider here. Let's see, a parking lot is allowable as a principal use in C1 as a conditional use. A parking lot has to be solely for the parking of motor vehicles, cannot be used as an off-street loading area. No buildings other than those for the shelter of attendants may be erected in a parking lot. Has to be screened according to the landscape manual and has to be kept free from refuse and debris. This particular property obviously has a vacant building notice on it, issued in 2021. I'm sure Mr. Hofberger will tell us about the future plans for that building. And that's it from me for right now.
So conditional use for a parking lot. As mentioned, the use standards do say no buildings other than shelters for tenants can be erected. So the decision has to be made on what the word erect means in this case. And one note from community planning is that the community is concerned of a lot of trash accumulating on that lot. So we just asked the applicant to advise their client to make sure that issue is addressed. Other than that, planning has no objection to the appeal.
Thank you. Nice to see you all again. So 2033 Eastern Avenue is the parking lot where the Burger King used to be on the southwest corner of Eastern and South Chester. It's in the Fells Prospect neighborhood, which is sort of an amalgamation of Fells Point, Butchers Hill, and Canton. And this property, for a long time, operated as various fast food restaurants. It was a McDonald's and it was a Burger King. There's also another smaller sort of ancillary structure that was a Rita's on the property. And for a long time, this was the site of a drive-through for these fast food restaurants. But in 2017, when Transform Baltimore was enacted, drive-throughs became a non-conforming use in C1 zones. And a few years after that, the Burger King stopped operating long enough that the drive-through is no longer an applicable, approvable use. And so the property sort of has this drive-through configuration without the capacity to operate any drive-through. So they've been looking for other uses. They thought about a bumper car track, but that didn't go. And so they're sort of sitting on this property. The property owners, John and Gabe Fontana, are sitting on this this property that has a lot of development potential. But yes.
But before you go too deep into your presentation,
Yeah.
Can we focus on the vacant building notice? Is there a current open violation notice?
They've been, the property owner has been working with the housing department.
Have they been abated as of yet?
They have not been abated as of yet.
No, it's still a vacant building, and it will be until it becomes, there's a use permit issued for it.
Right, so.
Which is not going to be in the near future.
Yeah, and so we can't really we can't process the application for conditional use if there's an open violation notice. And considering it's a VBN, we can't approve the conditional use as long as this open violation is still here.
Al? Let me bring up Al.
Yeah.
Don't forget to get sworn now.
The provision you're talking about.
Yes, swear now.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Do you swear affirmative penalty of perjury that the answers that you give and the statements that you make be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do. I believe the provision you're talking about was recently added to the code. And I would argue that, first of all, the vacant building notice, you have one of two ways of dealing with it. You can either tear it down, or you can find a new use to it, which the owner has been in negotiations over the last few years with the new use. In the meantime, I would argue that what we're asking for doesn't concern the buildings. It concerns the existing parking lot that's leased by a number of tenants in that area, and will continue to be until such time as either a use comes into either one of those vacant buildings.
Well, that use, wasn't that sort of secondary to the original primary use, which was a restaurant drive-through?
Well, there's a Burger King and then there's a Rita's.
Rita's there.
There's Rita's.
Right.
So there are two vacant buildings.
Right.
But the existing parking lot isn't going to be changed. It's leased by the, tenant. We just talked to one of the tenants, law firm, who leases spaces in that space now. So we're not changing anything. We're not taking the buildings down to solve the abatement issue.
Yeah.
I don't think it should apply because we're just.
I wanted to pull up my old, we did get an email from the property owner who said that he got a permit approved on the BK building in June. Do you know anything about that?
I don't. The vacant building notice isn't going to be abated until there is a use permit for the building, which I believe there is not.
And the most recent VBN we have, or violation, failure to abate notice was May of 2025, correct?
Correct.
And so, because I'm reading, Section 5, 410, about code compliance denial, and that seems to be square like what we have here.
Right. It says we can't process an application for a conditional use if the subject property has any outstanding notices of violation, fines, or fees that are either unresolved or unpaid. But we can if it would resolve the outstanding notice of violation. But in this case, having a parking lot is not going to do anything about the vacant building notice for the buildings.
Yeah.
I would still argue that the intent of that provision was to obviously have the property owners work toward getting that abated.
Yeah, so tear down the building.
Pardon?
Tear down the buildings.
That's an easy.
Yeah, it's easy said than done, right? I get it, but I mean, the zoning code, it's clear. It's clear. Until that VBN, it seems like the zoning code wants that structure to be dealt with, and doesn't want to find ways to get around dealing with that structure by providing for like a use. That's what the code is telling us right now. So it says we cannot process any application for a conditional use as long as there's any outstanding notices of violation. And so we have one for May 2025. So I think we can't move forward.
Well, I would disagree. I understand you're reading it as it's written, and I'm not suggesting we know what the council may have intended. But certainly if the result of that is to leave vacant buildings, for the foreseeable future, I don't think, or force buildings to be torn down, then that should be a change that the code requires, some way to get around that. Because again, we're just asking for not the buildings, we're asking for we could subdivide, I guess, maybe subdivide the buildings away and eliminate those violations.
Yeah, because the notice is on the underlying property itself, which includes both the building and the land, all of it. So, I'm going to be a no for the application. Or I don't even know if it should be a no. Maybe you guys have to withdraw it because we can't process it.
Postpone it and try to get some
Clarification? Sure.
Yeah,
Sure.
yeah, I think postponing would be
Yeah.
preferred to.
And we can deal with the city in terms of whatever.
Yes,
They
some
are
clarification.
satisfied to let us go. I would
Yes.
assume that if the housing department says the vacant notice building will be held in abeyance until the, if we can get their support.
If you guys can get some housing to bring this to their attention and
Right.
help us figure out a way for it, great.
Okay,
Yeah, I think we can.
okay,
Okay,
we'll work on that.
thank you.
All right, thanks.
Now I'm calling BMZA 2586 2700 Lock Raven Road, Carolyn Hecker for the applicant. The project is to use the property as an office, secondary to a warehouse, requiring conditional use approval. First, we will hear from planning and staff.
All right, the use requested here is an office. In this zoning district, that is allowable by conditional use if it is secondary to a warehouse. We should probably get some argument about what the word secondary means because it's not defined in the code, and it's not accessory. It's a different word. So we have a dictionary definition in your notes. And I believe the office and the warehouse are not related uses to each other. They're completely different from each other. So I will leave it there and pass it over to planning.
So again, conditional use for an office, it's got to be secondary to an industrial use. Office will occupy about 10% of the square footage of the warehouse, which will remain in operation. Again, secondary is not defined within the code. So planning recommends approval of the appeal.
Awesome. Ms. Tilden, will your client be speaking today? Okay, just in case, we're going to still have you sworn. Yeah.
You understand? Do swear. Yeah, can you stand?
Okay.
Do you swear or affirm under the penalty of perjury that the answers that you give and the statements that you make will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Can you state and spell your name for the record?
Scott Aden, Aden.
All right, let's get to it.
All right, again, for the record, Drew Tilden of Rosenberg Martin Greenberg. I'm here on behalf of the applicant. I'm joined, as you know, by Mr. Scott Aden, who is a representative of the applicant. As Ms. Witt has already teed up for you, the question today is whether or not this is the secondary use. Property is zoned I-1. This application is requesting conditional use approval to operate a secondary office space. So it's going to be 8,416 square feet inside of an 82,585 square foot warehouse. So that is approximately 10% of the warehouse space for reference. Just to provide a bit more background on the property and actually this board's approval history for this property. As I mentioned, there's an approximately 82,000 square foot warehouse on the property, and then there's also a separate 7,300 square foot office building. The warehouse is currently including that 8,416 square feet of office space, and it historically had supported the building's warehouse operator, Carroll Home Services, now Petro Home Services, previously operated both the warehouse and the office building. That tenant terminated operation of the secondary office building in 2022 and then vacated the warehouse at the end of 23. In light of the historic non-residential use of the secondary office building, this board in 2022 granted conditional use approval to lease the smaller building to an office tenant that was unrelated to the warehouse tenant, accounting for the fact that the primary use of the property itself, in light of the square footage still being far greater than 50% of this warehouse use, was going to be industrial. I've included a copy of that resolution in your file for your records. So in the last 2.5 years, the applicant has been unable to identify a tenant to operate the entirety of the 82,585 square foot warehouse. And so they're now seeking to do basically the same thing that the board approved last time. They'd like to operate this existing office space, so there's not any change in use of the proposed space that we're looking at. as an office, but just with a separate tenant from the primary warehouse user. Now, this is going to result in 17% of the property's total building square footage across both buildings being office space, and only approximately 10% of the subject building being office space. Again, primary and secondary is not defined in the code, but if you take a plain language approach to the interpretation of this statute, secondary would be 17% of the use. So applying the conditional use standards and just considering whether, apologies, and considering whether the proposed use would be worse at this location than anywhere else in the zoning district, applying those to the zoning code requirements. This is a 7,100, there's already a 7,135 square foot secondary office building. There's also two structures on here in terms of what the site is, including the size, shape, and building structures. The proposed secondary office use is not going to cause any difference in traffic patterns. There were already office users using this space, so that will not give rise to any negative impacts above and beyond a secondary office anywhere else in this district. The surrounding area is industrial, but it's also residential. Again, there's no change in this use, so this is not going to give rise to any negative impacts above and beyond. There are several dwellings, churches, public structures, the same use. Once again, the premises will maintain its current accessibility to emergency vehicles. There will be no change in light or air to the premises or the property in the vicinity. It's the same use. There are no structural changes, so this won't impact utilities, access roads, drainage. There are no applicable cultural or historic landmarks. The character of this neighborhood is I-1 with surrounding residential uses, so this is actually, the maintenance of what is already there is compatible with the surrounding uses as well. This is compatible with the master plan's designation of industrial use because this is going to be a secondary industrial use, which is consistent with the zoning code's contemplation of the I-1 district uses. There's no urban renewal plan. It's consistent with the purpose to preserve and enhance the value of structures, communities, and neighborhoods. It's going to facilitate the reactivation of this space. And the applicant also is just proposing to continue to use this portion for what it has historically been used for. So this approval of the operation of the existing secondary office space by a non-warehouse owner is not going to be detrimental to or endanger the public health, safety, security, general welfare, or morals because, again, this is the same thing. They're just going to have separate users. It's not, again, located in an urban renewal area. It's not contrary to the public interest. And, again, it is compatible with the land use plan in the city master plan. So for the reasons that I have set forth, we respectfully request that you approve our request for conditional use approval to operate a secondary office in approximately 8,400 square feet of the existing warehouse.
Thank you, Ms. Tilden. So I think we have a threshold question about secondary uses. Given just the plain language, the primary use of the property is clearly a warehouse, an industrial space. It's secondary in the sense of it's the overwhelming minority of the usable space is dedicated to office use. So in a sense, it is secondary in that sense. Have we, in the past, has that not been enough for the inquiry?
I can say it was sufficient in 2022 on the same property.
Yeah.
That went through on the consent docket, right?
It was sufficient.
Yes.
The consent docket means the board said yes.
Yeah.
No, for sure. But we did not go into a lengthy
didn't.
discussion
Gotcha.
about what secondary meant in that
Yeah.
situation.
Yeah.
So the board did approve it. I don't think that we have, in my recent memory, discussed what secondary means. So
I'm not in, especially for a space this size, it's not out of the ordinary for there to be multiple tenants at a property and for, a secondary use to be something that's not, it's operated separately from the primary use, or where the majority of the space is used. So in that sense, I'm willing to find that this is secondary to the primary industrial use. Anybody have any disagreement?
It doesn't bother me. I think that I question even the necessary use for the word secondary. I mean, is the industrial use require there to be and what is that? I think that's. I mean, I know we're trying to get over this threshold here, but
Is it all right if?
yeah.
Yeah, so in the I-1 district, offices are only permitted as a conditional use if they're secondary to the primary office use. But unfortunately, this is the only place that language appears in the code. But I think, Mr. Chair, what you just said is very true there. And also, Mr. Markazi, there are often multiple tenants, especially in industrial complexes. And so I think if you look at the spirit and intent of the code, they want to maintain this industrial space and ensure that it's not being kind of overrun by non-industrial users. Yes. And I think that's also consistent with the master plan, which states that they do want to maintain some industrial space. But at the same time, this is not resulting in the elimination of any actual substantive industrial space. This is reflective of what is normal in any industrial park, which is to have office space.
Yeah.
And so, that makes complete sense. But what we're saying, though, Ms. Wood, is that the zoning code, doesn't identify how big that has to be. It just says
No, it doesn't define secondary at all. It just says it's allowed by conditional use if it's secondary to an existing industrial use. So the board can define that in a way that makes sense to the board.
Yeah, that makes sense. No, I haven't.
Okay. Hearing no other sort of disagreement with that, I do find that this is secondary to the primary industrial use at 2700 Lock Raven Road. I do not believe that the establishment of the offices as described today would be detrimental to or endanger the public health, safety, or welfare. I have not seen any evidence that the use of the office conditional use is precluded by any other law. We've actually established that the code does not preclude the establishment of an office here. It will not be contrary to the public interest. I think keeping office space in our city, encouraging the productive use of sort of industrial space within the city is in harmony with the code and in harmony with the public interest, especially for this neighborhood. And under the Schultz standard, I don't think that the establishment of the office here would cause any adverse consequences that would be above and beyond what we should expect the establishment of an office in I-1 industrial zone anywhere else in the city. So for those reasons, I am a yes for the conditional use.
I am a yes.
I'm also a yes.
Questionable yes, but I'm yes.
Thank you, Mr. Clark.
I have a question. Do you already have a tenant for the office use?
Yes, the one we're proposing here, no.
No, you don't have a tenant yet? Okay.
I think the intent is to be able to market it more broadly.
I'm just trying to make it clear for the resolution.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it. Yes. And you have won the award, last case of the day. BMZA 2587 3307 West Strathmore Avenue, Chase Hoffberger for the applicant. The project is to construct a one-story dwelling addition and deck on the property requiring variances to bulk and yard regulations approval. First, we will hear from staff and planning.
All right, 2 variances needed for the proposed addition. Minimum interior side yard, 10 feet is required. 5 feet is proposed, and 5-foot variance. Is that on each side, I think? No, just on one side, okay. Just one interior side yard variance and maximum lot coverage. 25% is allowed, 32% is proposed, so it'd be a 7% variance. That's it.
Regarding the variances for the rear addition, planning has no objection.
Okay, thank you. Chase Hoffer, you're here on behalf of Moshe Sharin, property owner at 3307 West Strathmore. Mr. Sharin purchased this property in 2013, shortly after the property itself was created from a subdivision that occurred that split one lot into three. The original lot had 200 feet of frontage on West Strathmore, and the property goes back 150 feet. And the subdivision created 3 lots, one of which is on the corner that has 100 feet of frontage, and then 2 other lots, including Mr. Sharin's house, have 50 feet of frontage. The reason why I address the frontage is because in 2017, Transform Baltimore created the R1E zoning and designated this property R1E. The R1E zone is smaller in scale than most other R1 subzones, but it does have stricter bulk and yard regulations than your traditional R1 zone. Among those, it has a designation that requires 60 feet of lot width, as opposed to the R1, which has 50. Also, this property at 50 by 150 is only 7,500 square feet of total lot area, and the R1E requires 9,000. So by zoning the property R1E, the city created a non-conforming lot. And the non-conforming nature is relevant to the issue at hand here. Mr. Sharin plans to add 2 things to the back of his house. 1, a 324 square foot unenclosed deck, and 2, a 542 square foot 1-story addition. The addition will encroach into the side yard setback on the southwest side, by 5 feet. And together, the 2 pieces will increase lot coverage from 20% to either 27% or 32%. And the reason why I say that is because when we filed for a building permit, the zoning office said that we were at 27% lot coverage for this. The math there, if you remove the deck from consideration, we would be at 27% lot coverage. Now, I'm not here to say that the zoning office was right on that because the deck counts, but I just want to say there's just some ambiguity that is worth addressing here. Either way, we're in excess of 25%. So the peculiar conditions, as I mentioned, this property is non-conforming after a subdivision to the zone that it's in. It doesn't fit within the typical expectations of an R1 zone property, and it's non-conforming in a way that affects the side yard setback and minimum lot area, or minimum lot coverage, sorry. So the practical difficulty. When considering practical difficulty, we want to look at 2 things. When compliance with the strict letter of the restrictions governing area and setbacks would render conformity with such restrictions unnecessarily burdensome, and also when a grant of a variance applied for would provide substantial justice to the applicant. Here, the practical difficulty exists because Mr. Sharin is unable to build a house any wider than 30 feet, while his neighbors are able to build a house in conforming properties that is up to 40 feet. So, but for the fact that the property is non-conforming, if he had a conforming property, he would be able to build a house that is 5 feet wider on both sides, and he would not violate the rear yard setback. The same goes with the lot coverage. If the property were not conforming, or if the property were conforming and were 9,000 square feet, then he would only be 2% over the 25%, and we'd really be talking about a different type of variance here, something far more minimal. The 2%, to put it in perspective, is 150 square feet of coverage on this structure altogether, right? So I guess then we might get to the question of, well, why don't we reduce the size of the deck from the 324 feet to 170 square feet, right? And this gets into what might be Ms. Witt's favorite issue in the city, which is that the size of the deck is necessary because it is replacing an existing deck that every fall is used to facilitate the family's sukkah. And the sukkah needs to go on the deck. It is an existing structure, and it needs to go on the deck because the backyard has trees on it and a canopy, and a sukkah needs to have a clear, unobstructed view to the sky. So, fortunately,
What does that have to do with me? You said that was my favorite issue in the city.
you love this stuff.
Okay.
Fortunately, in terms of massing, it does not affect the scale. It does not affect the proportion. It does not affect kind of the way that people interpret or view the property. The neighbors won't see any difference in terms of the size of the deck, and the neighbors to the rear, the woodland blocks the viewpoint, so there's no change. So the property owner did not subdivide the lot or purchase the property until after the subdivision occurred. They're not responsible for the hardship. The purpose of the variance is to allow for the property owner to build a house that would conform to a fully conforming lot in the R1E zoning district. The addition will have a minimal impact on the neighbors. Mr. Sheeran has talked with his immediate neighbors, and they are supportive of the plan. And it aligns with the intent of the code because the code functions in part to ensure that the visions set forth in the city's comprehensive master plan are implemented. One such vision is equitable neighborhood development, and a stated purpose is the intent to advance policies that support current residents to make Baltimore a more inviting place to stay. This is not precluded by any law or urban renewal plan, and is not injurious to the use or enjoyment of other property. So for these reasons, we hope that you will approve the variance request.
I have a question.
Yes.
That it doesn't have to do with any sort of religious rituals. For the addition, you have more space, not you, your client has more space in the back, in the rear. How come they can't build their addition going straight back from the existing house line, which is 10 feet, which is conforming, and build in a slightly different shape back a little bit further toward the rear instead of toward the side? Do you see what I'm saying? It's a small diagram, but
Right.
you're going a little bit in toward the side lot line. Why not, instead of, you could put that same space on the rear and not be hitting up against the rear lot line? It's 30 feet, right? This is 30 feet. It seems like you have room in the back is what I'm saying, basically.
Right. It's just not what they put together. It's not, it's not kind of the intent of the addition. They didn't want it to expand too far.
Didn't y'all already apply for a building permit with plans that are conforming?
And then they changed, right. Well, it was not conforming in some ways, so we had to go, and so they changed it to try to. Right.
The side yard.
Yeah. So they wanted to go for this, right.
Okay. So it's a design choice.
I think you'd call that, yeah.
Okay.
Well, if it's a design choice, we bump into once again that question of self-created harm.
Does the board see what I mean about the side versus moving that same amount of space to the back? They still have space to fit it in the rear yard. Obviously, the interior would not be exactly the same. It would have to be redrawn, but that would not solve the
max
lot
lot
coverage issue, but it would solve the interior side yard issue, possibly.
Yes, I agree. I mean, yeah, I think it's pretty clear.
And you said they did consider doing that, but they just chose not to.
Yeah, when they were sent to the zoning board for the lot coverage, they changed their plan, and they decided that they wanted to try this.
And so the previous plan, or the plan that was submitted to the permit department, only had one variance request at that point then?
Right.
I don't understand why the client would want to have an additional variance. Like, one variance is one thing, but to ask for two, when you could get to the same outcome with one variance, you know.
Yeah, and that's part of that's part of the process. I mean, that's kind of why we get designers involved, is to kind of go about designing something that suffices with the requirements within the codes. So I don't see, even within all the explanations, the last one about the requirement to see the sky, I just don't see how that's affecting this request. So I'm leaning toward not, just the side yards. It's not something I really see the reason to accept at this point, especially if they already had a design that complied with at least
With the side yard.
minimize the
Yeah,
side yard.
yeah.
So that kind of leads me to a lot coverage question. So what, Ms. Witt, what exactly is can you maybe enlighten us a little bit? So Mr. Hofberg explained that the R1 versus the R1E. What exactly is it about the E within the code that maybe you have the answer to that? What exactly is it about that overlay of the R1E versus the R1?
It's not an overlay, it's two different zoning districts.
Right.
You could call them anything, but yeah, they're not related to each other. I don't know, Mr. Hofberger might know more than I do about the main differences between the two. I see, a larger lot size.
That's it.
Is that the only difference?
Yeah.
And a lot width.
Yeah, the lot
being-
width and the lot size are different.
Yeah, so.
R1E is intended for detached dwellings located on lots of at least 9,000 square feet. R1 is intended for detached dwellings on lots of at least 7,300 square feet, so it's really just size.
Okay, thank you.
And I will say, I think we do have a disproportionate number of variance requests coming from R1E. Maybe for more than one reason, but it is something that doesn't mean that that's a justification for the variances that are being requested. Might be a reason for council people to change the maps, but.
Either way, it would have been a 7% variance for maximum lot coverage. Now we have not only the lot coverage, we also have
The side yard.
the side yard. Well, I guess let's go to uniqueness.
What's unique about this? I don't see anything that's specifically unique about this site compared to any other site within that R1E, adjacent neighbors.
Well, it's a
Demographic
non-conforming lot.
challenge.
It's a non-conforming lot.
Non-conforming lot.
It's non-conforming
So in
to
that
width.
case,
Are there other similarly sized lots on the block?
On the block, there's one next door. So it's not exclusively unique, but is peculiar because it's non-conforming in width.
well, there's also, looks like, I don't have any areas, but there looks like there's probably similar size across the street.
Those are wider,
Those are wider.
and in many cases deeper. we'd like to postpone this.
Okay.
I think that's the best thing to do.
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
That's great. All right, thank you.
We'll look into the suggestions
Okay, thank you, appreciate it.
and come back.
All right,
No, we get it.
yes, thank you, guys.
Thanks.
And that concludes today's zoning hearing.